Ladies and gentlemen, your excellencies, our most honorable guests here in the Chernin Palace or online, welcome back after the short break. We have so many more for you on the program, and I would pinpoint one thing that the President Pahor and the young leaders talked about in their presidential chat, and that is unity. Unfortunately, the past years have shown us that unity is one of those things that should not be taken for granted, because we've sadly seen the UK took part from the EU in the unfortunate Brexit. But that doesn't mean the UK is gone for good. It doesn't mean that the chains are broken. And I think that we should act to achieve quite the contrary and to mend the damages and to act together again. And how that should be done, how the relations between the EU and the UK should be mended and how should they work in the future, that's the topic of our next panel. And I would love to give the floor to the moderator, Ms. Simone Neitz, the Managing Director of European Security Journal. Simone, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. So hello, welcome everyone, all of our esteemed guests who can join us here from Prague, and all of our guests who are joining online. I'm sure the panelists before me have already mentioned, but you will be able to ask questions here in the Palace in person, and for the people who are joining online, they can ask through the app. This will be a short discussion. Unfortunately, we're only going to have half an hour, but I promise I will keep it to time and I won't keep you from your lunch. So my name is Simone, and as was previously mentioned, I'm the managing editor of the European Security Journal, and I'm so incredibly excited to moderate this panel on EU and UK security cooperation, because security is so crucial to everything that we are talking about yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And cooperation is really at the root of security. There is no security possible without strong collaboration and cooperation. So Brexit has made this much more complicated. There are many unanswered questions. There are many things that we need to solve in the future, on top of the things that have already been solved already. But I am very happy to have a very esteemed panel to join me to help answer some of these questions. So our first panelist will be Sir Julian King, who is joining us digitally. Sir Julian King was the EU Commissioner for the Security Union and the last British EU Commissioner. He is specialist in counterterrorism, cybersecurity, and disinformation, and he is a senior advisor at Flint Global. And joining me here on the stage is Aleš Šlemar, Deputy Minister of European Affairs at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here in the Czech Republic.
Hello.
Oh. So, to start off, I would just ask Mr. King, could you provide us some background, some introduction? What are the biggest unanswered questions right now?
Well, good morning, and I'm very glad to be with you, albeit virtually. It's an important discussion being programmed. I'm very glad that you're doing it. I was the last British European Commissioner, at least for the time being, and I was Commissioner for the Security Union, so these subjects go very close to my heart. What are the outstanding challenges? Well, we might talk a little bit about foreign policy and security in a moment, but there are a range of shared threats, common challenges that we need to continue to try and counter together. Whether that's terrorism, violent extremism, different forms of cyber threat, whether they're criminal or there are state actors lying behind them, hybrid threats, the challenges of securing our critical digital infrastructure. Some of the things that used to be called new security challenges are very much on the agenda. And in order to meet those effectively, we need like-minded countries to work together. And I sincerely believe that means also finding ways to get the European Union and the UK after Brexit to work together. The good news is that the agreement that was reached, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, makes a lot of provisions that can underpin that cooperation in the future. We can talk about that a little bit more if you want as we go through. but there are provisions that link the UK to the work of the EU in some of the key agencies and organizations that deal with these challenges. There's some legal frameworks that bind the UK and the EU together. There's cooperation on sharing information and data that is crucial to tackling some of these threats. And there are a range of informal networks that continue to exist and which we can strengthen so that together we can tackle some of these shared challenges.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Slemmer, I would just ask you, how is it seen from the EU perspective? Is there still hope for collaboration? Are people hopeful, or is it frustration?
It is certainly not a frustration at the moment, or not, I would say, a definitive frustration, in a sense that we have hoped for more. That is true, and especially from a Central European perspective, especially from a Czech perspective, we hoped that as part of an umbrella agreement, or the comprehensive agreement, which is now the TCA, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, there would be more provisions on security, foreign policy cooperation, or defense, or even development policy. This is the case only partially, and as Julian King has said very clearly, it is a basis for further cooperation. But what we have seen the very first moments after Brexit, when we stopped to have an ambassador UK ambassadors as part of the COREPER and as part of the PSC, almost immediately the information started to somehow be limited in terms of flow to the British, and the coordination has started to be limited. So it will not be the same. The level of integration of our foreign policy, of our security policy, is very complex inside the EU, and we are still hopeful for the future that there could be some progress, that we could actually in years to come agree a more comprehensive agreement on cooperation in security and defense, and foreign policy also more in general. We have very much welcomed the review of foreign security, defense and development policy, which was the integrated review, I think it is called, from the UK side, where EU is mentioned as a key partner, which is also very important for us. The strategic compass, which was adopted on the EU side, also gives space for cooperation with key partners, geographically close and also allied countries. And these are two, let's say, monolateral or unilateral agreements or documents which do somehow have a sort of interaction. But I think that we will need to do more. And one of the ways where the cooperation is already happening is the bilateral. UK has already agreed with Poland, and with Germany also, which is kind of a breakthrough because the document is quite comprehensive, and a declaration of cooperation in foreign and security issues. We are also discussing with the UK side actually such a document, and although we try to have it as transparent as possible, it means that we inform about the progress in negotiations of the document as Germany did. We hope that it could also on this level, or on this ad hoc basis, which we have not preferred, but still it's better than nothing. We hope also to be able to advance individual security issues between countries. What UK has to understand, and I think the United Kingdom does understand, is that all the bilateral provisions or the bilateral levels of contacts will be somehow at some point be meeting in Brussels in terms of our communication. That this is still the EU is and will remain our basis, our first basis for cooperation in foreign policy, and therefore a more comprehensive agreement could be maybe more beneficial to include also UK to our meetings from time to time, and to have a more comprehensive discussion on different levels, not necessarily on the highest possible level too regularly, but also on the technical and expert level, which is key. And I also appreciate actually the welcoming from Mr. King, this sharing of data and information. I think that the role of the United Kingdom in the security architecture of Europe has been irreplaceable and is irreplaceable, especially in terms of intelligence, and also in terms of a very open cooperation between the UK and the United States, which is and will remain for Central European countries a key point in terms of cooperation also with the United Kingdom.
Thank you. And actually, that leads in very well to my next question, because, Mr. King, I wanted to ask you, what institutions do you feel, not necessarily does the UK feel, but do you feel are best equipped to deal with this integration? As we're talking about, intelligence is something that's so precious for dealing with security. Intelligence needs to be shared quickly, and it needs to be shared confidentially. So do you think that NATO is going to take on a larger role, or do you think that these bilateral agreements are going to be the way of the future?
Well, first of all, can I very much agree with what the Minister has just set out. The big distinction, which I think we're reflecting in our comments, is between cooperation on what you might call internal security matters, where there is a basis in the TCA for taking that forward and developing it further, and cooperation on foreign policy, security and defence, where there isn't a structure foreseen in the TCA, but as has just been described, because of the strength of the links, and I believe the shared approach to many of these challenges, various ways of cooperation are building up outside of the TCA, and I think that is positive. They need to be transparent, as has just been underlined, and they'll need at some stage to be a little bit of coordination between them, but they are very welcome. Now, on intelligence, as I'm sure many who are participating in the conference will know, there is a structure for cooperation across Europe between the national intelligence authorities that is outside of the EU framework. That hasn't been affected by the UK leaving the EU, that continues to do really important work where the intelligence agencies come together, share information, and are able to benefit from that cooperation. And that will continue. I think that's a very important underpinning of our wider security and indeed defence cooperation. There will be a need to look at some of the existing organizations and the kind of work that they do to make sure that we're not leaving gaps. So, for example, the G7 met recently and spoke about the importance of reinforcing a common effort against various forms of cyber challenges. Including the explosion in cyber crime that we've seen that is affecting our economies to a degree that it is, I think, a security challenge. And there I think that there is room for more European cooperation and cooperation with the UK to meet that challenge, to answer that call that came from the G7. And fortunately, the TCA provides for that kind of cooperation, working with agencies like Europol and the EU's cybersecurity agency, ENISA. The UK can build those links. NATO is doing more work in the cyber field now, and I think that's very welcome. It's working after the last meeting on tackling the challenge of dis and misinformation, particularly when it comes from outside of Europe. And is seeking to upset our democratic, the functioning of our democratic governance. And here's an area where the UK and European partners can work together in NATO, but also outside of NATO, the UK and the EU, I think, can work together to strengthen their efforts, complementing the work that's going on in NATO. And a similar thing is going to be possible in the challenge of building our resilience, the defence of our critical digital infrastructure, subject that's being pursued in NATO, but a subject that's also pursued in an EU framework, because, of course, it involves interaction with a lot of private sector actors as well, and the EU is well placed to do that. Again, I think there is scope for the UK and the EU partners to work together using the networks that have been built up over recent years that the UK was actively engaged in while it was a member state to complement the work that is going on in NATO.
So yeah, a lot of the institutions that are already there will expand their roles and sort of fulfill this mandate. So I want to ask, how is it seen from the Czech perspective? Is there political will to keep this cooperation at the EU level? Or is there, as you say, like already talks for a Czech-UK bilateral cooperation?
First of all, let me just very briefly talk about the concrete institutional frameworks that Mr. King has referred to. I mean, certainly what we have to see is that in some areas the UK has to remain, and there is quite a large consensus inside the EU that it has to remain actually very close to the EU. As it was said, intelligence cooperation, which is quite specific and is not necessarily going in the same framework as the EU, as there are also non-NATO members, and the cooperation always has to be agreed in a very sensitive way. But this type of cooperation needs to continue, does continue. Cybersecurity was mentioned, where also the UK plays an incredibly important role that we need to continue, including our specific institutions such as ENISA, to be able to cooperate with third countries in general and specifically with the United Kingdom. What was not mentioned, maybe more specifically, is the participation of the UK in CSDP missions, I mean, be it civil or training missions. This is also something that we hope to continue, because the overall geography, I mean, and as it was said many times during the Brexit debates, UK does not leave Europe per se, it leaves the European Union, so it is still there, and the level of threats, be it from flows and potential terrorism in Sahel, or also the situation in the Middle East, and maybe less visibly, but also security issues in the Western Balkans, will have to be dealt with together with the United Kingdom. And there we have the missions of the CSDP missions, but we have also the permanent structured cooperation, which is a quite fresh instrument that everybody knows, but that was just dormant inside the Lisbon treaties and awaken after the British referendum, but with a strong interest from the UK to participate as a third country. So there is also a range of areas where we already have a level of cooperation, for example, with Canada, with Norway, with the United States, for example, in military mobility, and where the Czech Republic would like to see also UK inside the circle. Again, as in my first point, it is just the new status quo that UK will not be or will not have the same access to all the circles inside the PESCO activities, because this is indeed an activity which is defined by the Lisbon Treaty, which is the EU treaty. Nevertheless, we as a Central European country and as Czech Republic, we very much promote this. And of course, the elephant in the room, which is the NATO cooperation, which is, but it's quite obvious that it is the most important security institution that we have in Europe. Nevertheless, the overlap between EU and NATO is not complete. You have countries or member states of the EU which are not in the NATO, and vice versa. So this is a very important type of cooperation where we need to seek synergies between NATO and EU, and in effect also synergies between the cooperation with the UK inside NATO and cooperation with the UK inside the EU. But it will be the most, I would say, fluent channel of communication with the UK, also in terms of sharing information, also in terms of dealing with a wide range of security issues. But as I said, the overlap is not exact between EU and NATO, so it will still play a rather specific role and not entirely on an EU framework. And my last point on the bilateral, as I said already, we are ready to cooperate very, very openly with the United Kingdom. We are also, after we finish up the drafting work on the statement of intent, which is now in elaboration, we hope also that we will be able to formulate very concrete action plans from a year to year, or plans for 1 or 2 years, where we will specify the areas of cooperation. And as we hear from our colleagues in Brussels, from our partners in Brussels, it is really a cooperation that basically, I'm not going to say every single member state, but a large number of member states will have with the United Kingdom, and we will be transparent, and we will try to also promote this type of cooperation, which is complementary to all those institutions that were mentioned in this debate.
Thank you. Yeah, the thing that I find maybe the most interesting thing about security is that a lot of the problems that we're dealing with today, we didn't imagine 10 years ago, we didn't even know about 20 years ago. You know, the fact that we would be talking about cybersecurity, you know, as national security, not as just private security, probably wasn't even on the agenda. So I wanted to ask about these things, these new emerging, or now traditional security, I guess you could call them. And do you think that the EU and the UK can successfully address these in, as you say, like 1 or 2 year agreements or on an ad hoc basis? And is there a danger of not having already strong written out protocol to deal with these emerging threats? And what is the risks of having, you know, ambiguous agreements? And King, I would like to pass the question to you first.
So again, I want to just endorse what the Minister said in his last remarks, and I think that the spirit of openness that he is showing in terms of trying to build back some of the links between the UK and the EU member states on some of these security issues is really, really important. And a number of EU partners are showing that openness, and I sincerely hope that the UK government is going to continue to respond positively, as it has done already in some of the bilateral agreements that have been referred to. There's one small cloud on the horizon. I hope it doesn't get too big. Some of the areas of cooperation also touch upon industrial policy issues. And I just hope that we're going to be able to continue to focus on the benefits of reinforcing security cooperation and not have examples where industrial policy concerns get in the way of that. Now, on your question, fortunately, there are a number of provisions in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement that are going to help. It is not empty on structuring the cooperation against some of these new security challenges. Obviously, it can't be the same. The UK has left. It has become, in the jargon, a third country. So the relationship cannot be the same as it was when the UK was inside and a member state. But there are provisions for very good relationships with some of the key security agencies. Some on the call will be familiar with Europol, Eurojust. There's a provision, as we've already touched upon, that can be built upon to boost links with the Cybersecurity Agency. There are arrangements for continued cooperation on many of the key law enforcement and security databases. The sharing of information, as we've already touched upon, is absolutely crucial to tackling many of these threats. We've mentioned the specific case of intelligence, but there's much more information that is shared between law enforcement and other security agencies across Europe. And that makes a huge difference as the frontline practitioners on the security side, the police, the border guards, immigration officers will tell you. It makes their job much, much easier to meet some of the challenges. And that can continue. There are some exceptions, but for many of the key databases, that can continue. And the framework, the legal framework, for example, of surrendering people who are wanted for trial that existed has been not completely reproduced, but largely reproduced in the arrangement between the EU and the UK. And that is also relevant to many of these new challenges, especially where they cross over with the criminal world, because those who are trying to cause us harm, perpetrators, need to know that they can't hide, and that if there is a valid case against them, they will need to answer it wherever they are across Europe. So I think that there are some very important building blocks. There are some constraints that people will be familiar with. All of this is conditioned by the understanding that the UK and the EU will continue to share an approach to protecting fundamental values and to protecting personal data security. And I see no reason why the UK and the EU should not be able to continue to share those values, because after all, those are values that we're seeking to defend.
Yeah, thank you. And since we're running short on time, I think I'm going to just jump straight into the audience question, if that's okay, unless you have something you want to add. So I have a question that I think is perfect for you, Mr. Schmeller. Does the EU's debate about developing a stronger strategic autonomy hinder strong UK-EU security partnership?
I really do not think so, and we had a long discussion on the strategic autonomy and on the concept itself. I think that its security dimension, even though it was a concept that was born as a security issue, has been somehow transformed into more, and throughout the pandemics and throughout also some inapproved mergers, to be implicit enough, we have moved towards an area where the topic of strategic autonomy is very much about being in control of strategic, also security-related issues, be it health issues, but also for the future maybe microprocessors, and maybe also to be able to somehow sustain competitiveness for the EU. There is maybe an overlap with what Mr. King said in terms of industrial cooperation, but not necessarily fully, because it is still prone to be open, and there is a consensus now on a new, I would say, additional adjective to the strategic autonomy, which is open strategic autonomy. And there I think that in security issues, what is key and what will remain as part of the strategic autonomy is the capacity to act in our neighborhood, be it Northern Africa, Sahel, or maybe other regions, and to be, let's say, not just a source of money for those regions, but also potentially a hard power, or help to have a potential of a hard power in European neighborhood, which is complementary completely with the ambitions of the NATO and also with the larger, I would say, security architecture where the UK is in, and where there is, in terms of our actions and security, or strategic autonomy and security issues in neighborhood, where there is also a synergy, potential synergy with the UK in terms of its participation in missions that provide some overall security. I talked about this. Geography has not changed. UK is still part of the European continent, and it faces very similar issues in terms of neighborhood policy, in terms of security issues around Europe. So I would not go in that direction. If I started the economic debate on strategic autonomy and an industrial debate, it might get more complex, but we are not there yet, certainly, and somehow it has been overshadowed by climate policy issues. So for the time being, I would be rather calm in terms of strategic autonomy not having a negative effect on potential cooperation between the UK and the EU.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's issues like climate, like COVID, where we all have the same values, we're all in complete agreement, and so there is really no obstacle to cooperation. Well, I'm hearing the bells ringing from outside, so I think that's pretty much our time to wrap up. I want to thank the audience that's here, and I'm so sorry I never had time to get to any questions from the castle, and I want to thank my dear panelists. It was wonderful talking to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.